Welcome to the Merge TV, where we discuss everything from real estate, finance, business, crypto, to entrepreneurism. In this video, I sit down with Mark Hopkins, aka Dr. Bitcoin, where we discuss everything from the current state of Bitcoin to why he's going on an extended stay at a prison. If you're not familiar with Dr. Bitcoin, there was a case a couple years ago where he was convicted for illegally transferring money to Bitcoin. Now, I'm not familiar with too much of the case. I'm also not a lawyer and I'm not a financial planner, so I don't know the legalities of everything. But from his point of view, from his take, it doesn't sound like he did anything that other people aren't already doing or still doing. So this video hopefully will give an opportunity for Mark to convey his point of view. There's a lot of conflicting narratives out there about, is he a straight up criminal that was doing wrongdoing? Or was he just caught in a situation where maybe he was taken advantage of? I leave that to you to decide. Personally, I'm a fan of Mark. I consider him a friend, and I can't wait to see when he gets back out of his extended stay, his extended vacation, or opportunity to work out and read. But I hope this video gives an opportunity for you to maybe see a different side of that narrative. I hope you enjoy. All right. Mark Hopkins, aka Dr. Bitcoin.
Right.
You're going on a trip next week. Before we get into that, I would like to talk about your journey into Bitcoin, into like pseudo celebrityum. And that was anonymous before recently, though, right?
Yeah, sort of, kind of. Like there's been a slow coming out of like over the years of like all my pseudonyms into my real life.
Right.
So,
because like right now you're still running 2 Twitter accounts, at least I know of.
yeah, I've got a few, but like most of them are pretty transparent to who I am at this point. So,
well, let's get into pre Bitcoin and just go kind of your story, your CV, your base knowledge, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. So like I've always been a tech guy. I worked for a company that later became Cox Communications. It was bought a few times before that. Was part of the rollout of the nation's second cable modem network when I was 17. Then I went to work for Apple and Nokia and a bunch of other places in the software side of the business. Got tired of working for a living after a while and decided to become a journalist because that's more fun. So I blogged. I wound up being one of the first 5 employees at Mashable. I founded an organization called Silicon Angle and a TV show called The Cube, which if you're in the enterprise tech world, you've probably heard of. If you're not in the enterprise tech world, maybe not. And then while I was at Silicon Angle, a buddy of mine who was a VP at Bank of America, ironically, introduced me to Bitcoin. We were a couple of buddies, went way back to my hometown where we would hang out at coffee shops late at night and geek out about nerdy stuff. And one of those nights when he moved up to Dallas right around 2011, he's like, "Hey, have you heard this Bitcoin thing?" And at that time I had not. He goes, "Well, tell you what, you've got your laptop with you. How about you pay for dinner and I'll pay you for my half with Bitcoin. That way you'll have some to play around with." And it took me about 2 weeks to kind of catch the bug on that and figure out like this is a thing that was interesting enough to kind of center my brain around. And so that's how I got into covering it as a journalist. That was my beat at Silicon Angle and The Cube for about 6 or 7 years that I had left there. And then I run some various like marketing and journalistic organizations since then that have been in some way, shape, or fashion around the Bitcoin or the blockchain space. I run a crypto mine out west of Fort Worth. Their headquarters is downtown Fort Worth. It's called GeoSyn, and I'm also involved in DAOs and stuff these days as well. It's a lot of fun. But that's, I don't know, 3 minutes.
Yeah,
my life in 3 minutes.
But I think the key takeaway for me though is a bit of journalism, and then Bitcoin since 2011.
Yes.
I remember our first encounter. I don't know if you remember our first encounter, and me and my, I don't know, naiveness was like, "Hey, so what do you do for a living?" Do you remember your response?
Yeah, I got into Bitcoin in 2011.
And do you remember my response?
So yeah, no, I don't remember what you said.
My response, cool. So what do you do for a living?
Yeah,
And then you just
repeated
repeated it
myself.
slower though.
Yeah.
Kind of like I did this in 2000, and then it was just like,
I did sort of gloss over how that changed my life because I have worked for a living, but it's been like an option, right? Since 2000. Well, not really since 2011 exactly, but like since Bitcoin took off in a big way, I would say, like in some sort of like period of time between 2013 and 2016, 17 is when like it was clear to me that I was going to work if I wanted to, not if I had to.
Because one of the stories you told me before was like you bought a iPad for like 76
Oh
Bitcoin.
yeah.
And at the time you were probably like, oh cool, this is a real thing. I can buy stuff with this stuff.
Right.
And now looking back, you're like, even the spot price is at 20 times 76 is not $1,000 iPad.
Not at all. No, it was. I remember it was discounted. It was like $700. So whatever, $700 and 76 Bitcoin, however that math works out, it was about 12 or 13 bucks, I think, at the time, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get into the main reason we're sitting here.
Sure.
Just so you can get because I know there's some, you were saying before that there's some journalisms, there's articles out there, there's certain narratives that are out there that, it's not my place to say true or not true, factual, not factual. I mean, I think in this age of media, it's always in the eye of the beholder.
Sure.
I mean, to some extent.
To some extent, yeah.
But like, so let's paint the picture of what were you doing? Were other people doing it? Was it innovative? Was it? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't comment on the legalities. But let's just go back and what were you doing and how did you get into that?
So the last major organization that I founded was one called Roger Wilco, and it was a consultancy agency type organization. And from the 2017 to 19 era, like it was when ICOs were blowing up. And we had we did one of the world's first ICOs in 2016.
What's an ICO?
Initial coin offering.
Okay.
So it's a little bit like an IPO, but with tokens. And so we helped launch and facilitate a bunch of those during that period of time. And the last client that we had was very successful with their fundraising, and acqui-hired most of our organization. And without getting into a lot of sad details, that organization that acqui-hired us then like promptly fell apart. And so this team that I had spent almost 20 years building and had followed me from multiple organizations kind of scattered to the winds. And so it was kind of at that point I was like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing here, And so, but I always sold Bitcoin kind of on the side since the very early days, since 2012.
When you say selling Bitcoin, what do you mean?
I mean, like put an ad out on sites like Local Bitcoin or Paxful.com or even Craigslist and say, hey, I will sell you Bitcoin as an individual.
Now, is this because there weren't exchanges at the time and it was a little bit harder? Because I've heard of crypto and Bitcoin forever, but until I got involved with smarter people than me, that I didn't know. Like, it seems like Coinbase and all these exchanges is a fairly recent new thing.
I mean, somewhat, yeah.
I mean, at least in
like Brian Armstrong was a guy like me from Houston.
Uh-huh.
He just sold Bitcoin, and then it kind of developed into a bigger business called Coinbase. But like in the early days, I did it mostly so I could meet people in the Bitcoin community in my area, right? Just, I'm selling Bitcoin. You want to be a Bitcoin? Let's be Bitcoiners together. And there were not you couldn't get it on Cash App. Cash App didn't even exist. Coinbase didn't even exist. There were a few sites like MTGOX or with a couple of like fly-by-night websites where you could sign up with PayPal or something like that. And it was very much like from week to week, month to month, the method of getting your money into those types of sites was different. And so someone like me was very useful back then because you just go to your Bitcoin guy and say, hey, give me some Bitcoin, and I'm the guy that has to figure out where I'm getting it from. And I just sell it to you for a slight markup. As time has gone on, the clientele that use a Bitcoin guy to purchase their Bitcoin has shifted over the years. Most of the time, from like 2017 or 18 onward, my clients were companies or family offices or venture capitalists that were looking to diversify. Law firms. There were many law firms here in town that catered to the startup clientele in Dallas that would call me up because everybody knew I was the Bitcoin guy and go, how do we acquire $500,000 worth of Bitcoin over the course of 2 days?
And you weren't doing anything secret. Everything is out in public, and
No.
other people are doing the exact same thing you're doing.
Right. I mean, like if you want to acquire a significant amount of Bitcoin today, even in the modern time, you've got to go through an incredible amount of vetting with whatever exchange you're going to use. You have to have such a relationship with your bank that your accounts are not going to get immediately shut down for large scale Bitcoin transactions. I still hear reports with major banks like like Bank of America or Wells Fargo, where even people that are just using Coinbase and getting a couple $1,000s a month are getting accounts shut down. So if you're going to be someone who is getting Bitcoin on the regular or getting massive amounts of Bitcoin for business purposes, it helps to have an OTC representative, someone that buys Bitcoin for you, and just let them worry about their bank accounts getting shut down or figuring out where the best place is to source large amounts of Bitcoin without moving the market. Of course, as time has gone on, what constitutes a large amount of Bitcoin has dramatically shifted. Like from 2017 to 2019, if I buy $10 million or $50 million worth of Bitcoin in a day, I'm moving the market several $1,000s. And when the price is $7,000 or something like that, that's significant. You can double the price of Bitcoin accidentally if you don't know what you're doing. Nowadays, billions move in and out all the time. So the market is much less sensitive to that sort of thing. But for the majority of Bitcoin's existence, that hasn't been the case.
So what you're saying is the majority of Bitcoin existence, market movers was a real thing.
Right.
And nowadays, because the implementation and the, not the implement,
just the size of the market.
Yeah.
That's made a big difference.
Yeah.
I mean, when it became $1 trillion market, it takes a whole lot more to move the point, and you've got to do stuff with shorts and longs and stuff.
Well, it's interesting that you said though that you used to could be that, because like I've done Forex, I've done this, and I think one of the thing that makes you realize that how stupid people really are is they think that their $1,000 investment's going to move any needle, and the reality is your $1 million investment is not going to move a needle.
Whereas in like 2012,
right.
I would be sitting in the pickup line for my son, who is at the time in kindergarten, waiting for school to let out. I'd be on MTGOX on my laptop in the car, and I would move the market like $100 either way, or more like 10 or 15 bucks either way at the time, just because no one was trading Bitcoin.
What kind of a size transaction?
So I went back over my trading logs. I think I traded something like $3 million over the course of 3 years. So but individual transactions, you're only talking like maybe 10, 30 grand, something like that, would move the market in a several dollars either direction.
That's still wild to think about.
Yeah. Nowadays, for sure. Yeah. But you're also talking Bitcoin being priced between 13 and $100. So.
Right. What year was this?
This would have been like, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but like 2012 or 13.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you were doing a thing that not everybody, but a lot of people, other services were doing, other people were doing.
Yeah.
You talked about Coinbase, the guy that, I don't even know his
Brian
name.
Armstrong, yeah.
Brian Armstrong, and he was doing the same thing, and it evolved into a company. Like, so how long were you doing this, and then when?
So like I said, that organization that kind of like collapsed or was acqui-hired and went away, that was 2019. And so because I had this experience, not day trading, OTC trading, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take it easy. I'm not going to try to jump into my next thing right away. I'm just going to. It was like right as the pandemic was kind of kicking off too, is in that same time zone, 2020. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to trade OTC. I know I can make money with it, and maybe something will fall in my lap. And I developed a pretty decent clientele, mostly businesses, a couple family offices that folks in Dallas might recognize the names of, and a couple of clients that I was picking up off of boards like Paxful or Local Bitcoin that were out of state. Sites where there are hundreds of thousands of traders like me. And what happened was one of those clients who had represented herself in a certain way had said that she was buying Bitcoin so she could purchase electronics for her husband's, electronics repair business. Was in fact purchasing Bitcoin as a mule for a Nigerian lottery scam. And I had a year-long relationship with her, and her pattern of Bitcoin purchases, her explanation of the business matched other businesses that I had serviced that were local to me. So I didn't really have a reason to suspect that she was lying, other than the only thing that made her at all fishy at all, and it was just kind of a minor factor, was the fact that she was so uneducated about cryptocurrency. But that's a lot of people. I mean, that's kind of my role, is to onboard people.
I mean, I've been associated with the TBC for almost a year now, and I still consider myself a severe novice. And I've done educational pieces with Michael Llewellyn where he's trying to teach me Bitcoin. I've had long conversations with you and other people at meetups, and I still feel like an idiot most of the time.
I'm not really an expert. I've just been around it for over a decade now.
Yeah.
So like I'm really, you kind of pick some stuff up over 10 years, but that's just how it works. Like there's not an expert on crypto unless they're like, Satoshi Nakamoto or Vitalik Buterin or something like that,
Well, one thing that, a pivot for 2 seconds, it blows my mind is when it comes to like Bitcoin maxis and how if it's not Bitcoin, it's fake. It's everything that's not Bitcoin is a scam. And it's like, okay, but isn't there like 20,000 crypto projects or something and more every single day? How can you blanket statement 100% are scams when you haven't vetted all of them? But that's another topic.
That is a
day.
great topic that we could rabbit hole on for ages, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm with you though. Like I've
Well, again, just to continue down this path for 2 more seconds, the way I look at it is I see the crypto era similar to the early 2000s era with the .com, where, all these websites that were getting VC capital for hey, let's develop a fart website, that's probably not a safe and sound investment. And 98% of the .com, I'm just making up numbers, but 98% of the .coms at that area were trash and went defunct. But you got Google, you got the Yahoo, you got the AOL, you got all these powerhouses, Facebooks, whatever. I see crypto, I see this as like that.
Innovation is messy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it's always been. Innovation's always messy. There's if you dig into Silicon Valley culture, and that's something that I covered as a journalist a while, there is plenty of detractors that sound like Bitcoin maxis that will tell you how horrible, evil, and corrupt the venture capital culture is in Silicon Valley. And they have salient points, just as the Bitcoin maxis do. But that does not mean that, if it's not Facebook, it's crap or whatever, there's got to be one of the things that one of my hosts at theCUBE used to say whenever we're talking about different products in the enterprise world, take hard drives, for instance. A hard drive's not a hard drive's not a hard drive, right? There's hard drives for different storage solutions for different situations. And he would say horses for courses, right? You don't take a rodeo horse and go try to race it at the Kentucky Derby. Mm-hmm. You don't take a hard drive or a storage device that's meant for a Chromebook and try to jam it into an HP converged infrastructure device. That needs a different type of storage for RAID array and magnetic and all that. So like it's the same thing with crypto. It's the same thing with a lot of technology solutions. What Ethereum is good for is not what Bitcoin's good for. Bitcoin is the best Bitcoin. There's not going to be another Bitcoin that beats Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. There might be other cryptos that have more market utilization, more users, or more interesting applications, but they're not going to beat Bitcoin.
Right. So let's get back on track though.
Yeah, for sure.
just for what is a Nigerian lottery scam?
I mean, this was new to me as well.
Because I know the Nigerian prince scam.
Essentially, the way this one works is somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, you won the lottery. It's great, $1 million, whatever, but you need to pay the taxes on it. So all you got to do is send a payment to this bank account address, and then as soon as that's confirmed receipt, we'll issue you your check for your lottery winnings."
And people fall for that.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
Anyway, so how long were you working with this woman?
I think a little bit shy of a year, maybe a little bit. It was around a year,
And
plus or minus.
do you know, like, what was the total valuation of how much she bought?
So through me, and this doesn't mean this is all lottery scam money, but this is how much she spent with me on Bitcoin.
Right, because you don't know.
I don't know the source of funds. I know what she said they were, but
Right.
I don't know what they actually were. $528,000 over the course of a year.
Okay.
And I had no reason to suspect that. I mean, this is like I said, 55-year-old white woman from Pennsylvania,
Right.
middle of the mountains, like not even in the city. So like, what scam is this? This person didn't seem sophisticated enough to run a scam. I had no reason to suspect her story. So that was my belief up until 15 agents knocked down my door in the middle of the morning.
And that was your first. That was your first introduction that, oh, something is amiss.
Yeah. 15 agents from the White Collar Crime Division out in Fort Worth busted down my door in Richardson, Texas, and took nearly every electronic device in my entire house. Some that were like, a decade-old laptop, everything. Just if it had a battery in it, it was gone.
Now, was there a knock? Was it no knock? Was it like...
There was a knock, yeah.
what was that encounter like? Because I know we all know the movies and we all see TV, but...
So it's interesting. I wasn't actually there for it. The morning of... so we were doing, with this woman, we were doing cash by mail for a variety of reasons. So she would cash by mail is if you go on Paxful or go on Local Bitcoins, it's a huge section for it. For a variety of reasons, but mostly because she lived in a little town with no national banks in it, so she couldn't get a reliable wire transfer. That much was absolutely true. And so she was shipping us like through UPS and FedEx, basically
Actual cash?
actual cash, yeah. Which is not unusual, again, for a lot of my clients were cash. Like mostly cash clients.
Right.
There's a Bitcoin ATM network here in town that would give me bundles of cash, and I'd take it to my bank and I'd give them Bitcoin for it,
But what's funny is because I understand hindsight 2020, and I know through this conversation there's already going to be a sketch element. But I mean, so it's hard for me to sit here and say, man, that just sounds sketchy. But like you said, a lot of your clients did that.
Well, think about who's involved in Bitcoin too. Right. There's a lot of people, just to say like how not weird it is that people hand you Walmart bags of cash.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of libertarians, tinfoil hat, not to say that all libertarians are tinfoil hat, but there's a lot of tinfoil hat wearing libertarians in the Bitcoin community because of what Bitcoin can offer, which is government seizure proof money. And so you're going to, just people that are politically motivated to buy Bitcoin are also going to fit that profile of weirdos with bundles of cash. And they're not doing anything wrong. They just want to have their money not in a bank account.
Right. And again, when it comes to cash, it's not illegal to have cash.
That's right. As much as the government would like to make it feel like it's illegal.
It does, yeah. Because I know, because in my experience with real estate and real estate investing, there's certain people, well, I don't say there's certain people, but I have seen people that when you buy their house and they're pissed that they're getting a wire, they're pissed they're getting a check, they're expecting to have briefcases full of cash.
Everybody wants that James Bond experience where you open it up and
yeah.
or whatever.
But it's like, and some of these people aren't sophisticated to know that, like, hey, we go through a title company.
Sure, yeah.
Just because I sign a contract for your house doesn't mean you're getting cash right now. That doesn't happen. We got to go through a third party.
Yeah.
So I guess in that element, you could maybe you're that third party doing that.
I mean, essentially the way I've always looked at OTC people is it's the ultimate decentralization of banking. Like the vision of the future, like a fully Bitcoined up future. Sure, there might be some banking brands still left alive, but there will be banking brands that are still left alive in the same way that we have newspaper brands that are still left alive. Like the Washington Post, their most popular media property right now is their TikTok channel. That's not a newspaper in any sense of the word that you and I grew up with.
Right.
But, and that's what I feel like most banking is going towards. Yeah, Bank of America might have like some sort of custodial Bitcoin solution, but if you need Bitcoin or if you need crypto from somebody, you're probably going to, hey, who's the Dr. Bitcoin in my group that can help me out and what exactly I need to get done?
So going back to the 15 FBI agents that raided your house.
So that morning I got a box, like which was normal, has happened like, 20 other times or something with her, 37 other times. I open up the box, and instead of the money in there, there is a ream of printer paper, just blank printer paper. And we're like, oh crap, did somebody like at UPS steal the money or whatever? We're like, okay, well, whatever. I've got to go meet some other clients. And so I took pictures, I documented everything, uploaded it to the group chat where the client and I were in, and said, okay, well, let's sort this out. But I feel like, UPS might have stolen your money or something. Like something's going on. Something's definitely fishy here. Then I drive up to Frisco to meet another client. And as I'm wrapping up that transaction, my wife calls me and says, the FBI is here. And it's about Mildred. And I'm like, okay, well, go,
And you're probably thinking, well, yeah, of course they're there. A lot of money just got stolen.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, that's what I thought too. But, and so like I messaged, but I could tell from my wife's voice, like it was not just like a cordial call, right? She was panicked. So like, it was explained to me on the phone call that they need me there right now. They're taking away phones. They're not going to be able to communicate. My wife said she opened a door to say, to whenever they knocked, and she tried to shut the door. They like stick their foot in there and hold up the warrant, and then they all come streaming in the house and all this other stuff. So it was definitely not a cordial house call. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'm like an hour in traffic away, and so I'm sweating it out. I can't get a hold of my family. I don't know what's going on. My kids are both at home. I'm also meeting another Bitcoin client, so I've got 70 grand in cash that I've got to drop off at a bank before I go to my house where a bunch of agents are.
Right, because because of course if you go home, that money's going to be seized, and you're screwing over a client.
Right. Yeah. It was. I won't go into a lot of the details of what I did to protect myself and to because I had to do some stuff that was to seizure proof my crypto.
Right.
But I did those things as I was driving straight back to the house, and then they stuck around the house for about another 4 hours, just rifling through and cataloging all these things in my house. The two main agents were asking me a bunch of questions. I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong. I ran an above board business. I did KYC AML, where I would take people's driver's license and social security numbers and all this other stuff. Did all the things that you're supposed to do, ask for the source of funds, all that thing. Documented everything. So I'm like, I'm in the clear. Nothing I've done wrong. I'm happy to cooperate if they're being a criminal. I've always told all of my clients that if you're doing something criminal with the Bitcoin I'm selling you or whatever, I'm not going to protect you.
Right.
That's not my role. I'm not going to prison for you. You need to pay me a lot more if you want that to happen.
Right.
Nobody's paying me enough money to go to prison for them.
Right. Right.
So so I was completely transparent, and that was my fault. That was my problem. Because everything that followed was because of everything that followed, things that were in the press release that the DOJ eventually put out, were all things taken out of context from that conversation.
Well, on that, I think, do you come from like a middle class, lower middle class, or do you come from like higher rich?
Middle class. No, was not a rich person growing up.
I think that's one thing that I think the rich really instill in their their offspring is attorney, lawyer.
Yeah.
Whereas like middle class to say maybe poorer, hey, if you're a good person, everything will be okay. Just tell the truth. Tell
Right.
the truth, and the truth will set you free. You'll be okay. And again, the rich, they tell their people, I don't care if you killed somebody. I don't care if you're completely innocent. Don't talk to police. Get a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I think this is a great lesson in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
They're not your friends. They're not there. So what the deal was as events unfolded after the raid, what I came to understand is that they assumed that I was the kingpin of whatever organization was going on because all the cash was flowing to my house. And so when it turned out that I was the kingpin of squat, and that the only thing that I had going for me is that I had an online presence tying myself to my Bitcoin dealings. They're like, well, we got to get him for something because we spent all this money rolling out all these agents doing a raid. What laws can we say he broke? Oh, well, 18 USC 1960, operation of an unlicensed money services business. Because as it turns out, in May of 2019, in the middle of this relationship I had with this woman, the FinCEN, which is the organization that governs how money service businesses in general have to be licensed, issued a guidance memo saying that you must register federally if you were going to be involved in anything that they termed digital virtual convertible currencies. They didn't mention Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in this guidance memo, so you couldn't just Google it. But they call it digital virtual convertible currencies. If you sell them, then you must register with FinCEN and apply for the appropriate state level licensing. What's interesting, and because as I hired some compliance lawyers immediately after the raid to figure out that particular piece of information. What's interesting is what a lawyer will tell you is if you live in Texas or Wyoming or some place that doesn't require state level licensing, all you got to do is fill out this free form and then have some legal documents on hand saying so. But if you ask the feds, as I did while I'm in the middle of investigation, I'm legally registered now. They said, well, no, you're not state level licensed. And so therefore it is not legal for you to continue to operate your business. I actually, for my newsletter, interviewed the general counsel for the Department of Banking for the state of Texas, because they had issued some memos saying we don't issue licenses for any type of Bitcoin seller unless you're operating a Bitcoin ATM network or you're operating a full-on exchange like Coinbase. And I said, well, what do I do? I've got federal agents here telling me you're not compliant, and I've got your department saying I am compliant. He goes, I'm sorry, we can't advise you on that. Consult your attorney. So this is a situation where I view this situation that I've fallen into as like the new cannabis, growing issue or something like that, where for decades certain states made it statewide legal to grow and sell and do things with medicinal marijuana, but the federal DEA was still adamantly opposed and in some cases would, raid growers or, medicinal distribution dispensaries or whatever. In that same vein, Texas and Wyoming and Delaware and other states like that are literally manufacturing felons like me.
How many in this world, you can't be the only one.
Oh no.
But at the same time, you can't be the only one that they arrested either. Is there one or two more Dr. Bitcoins out there being arrested for this, or is there thousands? And how many other people are doing what you did?
It's hundreds is the number.
Being arrested, or hundreds doing?
Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, doing what I'm doing.
Right, or did.
Hundreds being arrested for it. Because keep in mind, they weren't coming after me for 18 USC 1960. They were coming after me for money laundering and wire fraud,
right,
and mail fraud, things that I had no involvement with.
Because they thought you were the kingpin.
They thought I was involved. They thought I was the mastermind of this whole situation.
Right.
And when it was discovered, it's like, okay, we got to get him for something, right? And that is, if you go to the Blockchain Law Center, don't have to take my word for it. Blockchain Law Center is a legal advocacy group out there that collects information about crypto-related cases. And at the beginning of my set of issues in December of 2020, I guess, yeah, I had them pull a list of all in the last 12 years at the time, or 10 years at the time, of all the different violations of 18 USC 1960 that had gone to trial. And in the early days, it was usually reserved for it was it was tack on crime for other major crimes. Like, for instance, the guy who heisted Mount Gox and then turned around and created another exchange for laundering the funds, he went to prison for 18 USC 1960. A couple of child pornography CSAM distributors who were using Bitcoin also had this tacked on. This is like early days of Bitcoin. As time goes on, it was you see the cases, the amounts of money and the seriousness of the crime go way down, and like several cases around 2016 and 17, 15, 16, 17, they were going to prison over $7,000 just because they got caught in a local dragnet or a local sting operation or something like that. And very few, like myself, fight this because the federal government has an 80% win rate when they go to trial. I mean, just how long has it taken for me to explain the situation? And I'm sure I haven't alleviated all doubts in your mind about my innocence. Like, there's still kind of like things you don't understand. How am I going to convince 12 people on a jury that me getting a box of money and turning it into Bitcoin is not somehow a weird or possibly illegal thing?
Right. Well, and that's what I was saying before is, like, hindsight, well, yeah, that just sounds sketchy, but if it's happening all the time, like it happens at banks all the time, if I'm buying a house or if I'm selling a house, because there's a lot of times you do owner finance to Hispanic families. Well, you're talking about a culture who traditionally doesn't trust banks. You know, they quite literally have thousands of dollars under their mattress. There's a reason there's that stereotype and that
I mean, a lot of my clients over the years were day laborers, roofers, plumbers that they get paid in cash, and hey, Bitcoin sounds better than giving it to Bank of America.
Well, I think, again, a culture, and I don't want to fixate on Hispanic cultures, but like in Mexico, like, or South America, where you have banks just close overnight, or, you know, just stop paying, you can't access your cash. That's a very valid fear.
Not even just a south of the border thing. That's actually quite the dominant experience for banking around the world, except for most of Eastern Europe and America. That's literally everybody experiences that around the world. Africa,
but we forget
Asia.
that there's anything outside of our borders.
Outside of this room.
Outside of the United States or this room, you're right, nothing exists. So going back, you said before that the DOJ and there were a lot of narratives that they were maybe manipulating or twisting the words or those conversations. What was the false narratives that were put out there?
Well, so
from your perspective,
I mean, not even from my perspective. Like it was like straight up false in the press release. If you go to the justice.gov website and look up Dr. Bitcoin, you'll see the press release they wrote about me. They refer to my client as MH, and they even misgender her in the article, and to make it seem like MH was a Nigerian foreign national that I was interfacing with directly. It's a very weird way to parse the words that they did, and it was written intentionally to make it look like I was far more culpable than I actually was. They actually said that I never performed any KYC AML, when in fact I mean, I could pull it up on my phone. I've got her driver's license. I'm not going to obviously put it on the camera or anything, but like I've got her driver's license information. I've got her social security.
Now, is she in jail, or did she move to Nigeria?
No, she's in jail.
They got her.
Yeah, they raided her the day after me. Because again, no one was hiding her, her information. Like I gave them her address,
Oh, when they you're like, yeah, here she.
Yeah, this is my client right here. Yeah,
Go get her.
yeah.
I'll help you.
Yeah, I literally did. You know, I'm like, this is, you want to know who Mildred is? This is Mildred. This is where she lives.
And man, I don't know. Anyway, so there was they misgender. They make it seem like you're dealing directly with the Nigerians. What else were they putting out there?
Well, I mean, just to back up for a second, that also was a weird way in which they used Nigerian in a pejorative sense. For those that are watching this that are Bitcoiners, know that Nigeria has always been a hotbed of legitimate Bitcoin adoption. Like if you go on to these international OTC boards, you'll run into tons of Nigerians that are not scam artists that just don't want to have their local currency. Because banking infrastructure in many parts of Africa is not that great. So Bitcoin is a great and viable alternative to the local banking in Nigeria and surrounding nations.
So do you think the narrative could potentially be the system fighting against Bitcoin, or is it just, do you think it's more just a sense of, hey, we spent this money and raided this guy?
It's the banality of evil. I would love to paint a free risen narrative that paints me as some sort of like martyred guy. I honestly think it's just how screwed up our system is. The prosecutor, I'll give you a sense of the FBI agents. They're all very milquetoast, kind of young kids just do it. Especially, yeah, they're these agents. They're all agents, but they're like just. There was nothing about them that screamed like, out to get you. They were just there
doing a job,
checking a box, right? When the prosecutor's office, U.S. Attorney's office gets involved, you could tell that's when egos got introduced.
Yeah.
The gentleman who prosecuted me is a guy named Siddharth Modi. So as you know, TBC predecessor organization was something called the NTBA, North Texas Blockchain Alliance. I was a co-founder of that. One of the hobbies of the NTBA co-founders, with Cody and Michael and these other guys, we would hunt down scam artists and whistleblow on them. And one of those individuals was a guy named Jared Rice, I believe. Arise Bank was his ICO that he was doing. He was attempting to do the world's largest ICO at the time. I think it was like $120 million. He got up to raise like 6 or 7 million or something. Where he screwed up was he started listing places that were his office that were not his office, including mine at the time. And I was getting his mail and getting people coming in asking for him about this. And so I put him on my radar. We entrapped Jared to admitting a whole bunch of stuff in a group chat at the NTBA on Facebook Messenger, and then we just turn it over to the SEC. He was up for at one point like 110 years in prison over the level of fraud that he perpetrated. I don't know what his final sentence was. It was a couple of months ago. I haven't looked it up. Sid Modi, the guy who prosecutes me for this case, we gave him all the evidence that he needed to successfully prosecute this guy. Like we had a working relationship with this guy, and I think they gave him a taste of, oh well, I can just go after crypto people and make a name for myself. And so he went after a couple of other clients that were clients and people that I had known from the Dallas space for improperly filing regulations with the SEC and that sort of thing and screwing up their startups. And he comes after me, and I got to be careful what I can say here because I did sign some NDAs about parts of this. But in one of the meetings where they brought me and my legal counsel and the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office around to talk about my case, it's called a reverse proffer. You're not supposed to talk. You're supposed to listen to what the government has to say about your case, and then make a decision how you want to work with the government. After an hour of listening to their case and after an hour of listening to this guy talk, he goes, "Hey, Mark, I just want you to know, I've watched your Dr. Bitcoin videos. I've read your white papers. I just want you to know I don't think you're that smart. You don't strike me as very intelligent. Anyway, I want you to have a great day." Shook my hand. I'm going to talk to your lawyers for a little bit, and you guys can just wait outside for us. Like the guy just was a dick, like just needlessly mean, trying to get a rise out of me, trying to get under my skin for no reason other than he just didn't like me, or maybe he doesn't like crypto. Maybe he's one of those guys that thinks all crypto people are scammers or something. But he had it out for me. The deal that he put in front of me was that we're going to come after you and your wife, because your wife's name is on all your bank accounts, for 35 years each. We're going to charge you with everything we're charging Mildred with. Or you can take a plea deal, and we'll take your wife off the table. And so I took the plea deal. And the plea deal was for the thing that I was actually guilty of, which was not registering with the federal government to sell Bitcoin.
Which was a free, online form type thing.
Correct. I didn't fill out a checkbox in a form.
Oh, man, that's rough.
Yeah. So, as you say, I am beating the housing crisis by spending 15 months at an all-expense-paid vacation by Uncle Sam.
I saw that. It was there. It might have been a Babylon Bee thing, but it was the whole, the new be an entrepreneur in 2022. Go to jail, free library, free gym.
Yeah.
Plenty of time to work on the hustle, the grind.
Yeah.
And it's just like no distractions.
No distractions. No rent.
No rent.
Yeah.
I mean. But so when because I know you did some, and I know you still have to be careful about what you could talk about, but when did all these, hey, assist the government in these different projects and different things to try to help your case? Was this before or was this after? And how did that come about?
I'll be very careful in how I talk about some of this stuff, because there were some folks that were in my client list that I didn't know were involved in very serious crimes. I won't get into the details or the nature of it. It wasn't anything immoral. It was just like, big financial crimes,
right,
to the tune of multiple millions that I was not aware of. And so a couple of those situations I was asked and freely volunteered information about, where I felt it was, morally acceptable to talk about. Like, I'm not just going around ratting out every little thing I thought somebody did,
right.
But when they're asking me, hey, this guy committed, a serious amount of fraud on his neighbors, what do you know about this? I'm like, well, I can tell you how much Bitcoin he bought, and that's about it. And so there was like 3 of those situations that I was able to provide information on.
I want to push back on something you just said, because you were talking about not ratting out. To me, that's not a ratting out situation. First of all, the whole concept of snitching and ratting is ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
But from my perspective of what you were, hey, I'm a business and I'm doing business things, and the government is asking me about a client, and it's not like they're asking confidential information. To me, that's not ratting. That's just, hey, yeah, here's my records.
Right.
You're covering your bases by saying you have those records.
Right. Because none of these clients employed me to cover up their crimes. They employed me to buy Bitcoin.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, but there was that, and then there was. So I provided that, and they're like, okay, this is going to go a long way to reducing your sentence. Spoiler alert: it didn't. They conveniently forgot about it when it was time to actually talk about sentencing requirements.
Right.
And it became very clear to me that Sid was not going to play fair when it came to reducing my sentence for cooperation. So what I did instead is I went to my own network, and I found people that I knew that were working for the federal government and working for organizations that assisted the federal government, and just basically said, hey, here's my situation. You want to give me a job? You want to hire a felon? and fortunately, 1 or 2 of them said yes. One of those was a good friend of mine from my school days, who runs an organization called the NCRI. It's the Network Contagion Research Institute. The NCRI does research primarily on digital extremism, domestic terrorism, not of any particular political stripes, all political stripes. They're nonpartisan in that respect. They do a lot of research about like where the seeds of extremism come from and how it manifests. They didn't have any crypto expertise on staff. And so they brought me on to do a report called The Diseconomies of Memes, which focused a lot on there was 5 parts to the report. One of them was talking about state actors that were manipulating markets, like Iran manipulating silver markets using social media. So we did some market analysis there. We talked about like the GME stonks stuff, that was going on during the pandemic, and how social media manipulation played a part in that. We did some research on Elon Musk and showed how, if not Elon himself, somebody in his organization very, very close to him, there's very clear and obvious evidence that somebody was pumping and dumping Dogecoin, playing off of specific tweets that he would put out to the world, defrauding the general public to a tune much larger than like BitConnect did in the ICO era, and frankly damaging the crypto ecosystem. And then we also did another part of the report focused on the evolution of social impact DAOs, which was what got me involved in Free Ross DAO and Ukraine DAO and other places. But it was a fascinating report. The data for that was handed over to the SEC. It was handed over to the Canadian Ministry of Intelligence. Created a very good working relationship between myself and Alona Shavenko at Ukraine DAO with the Ukrainian Ministry of Information. And it led to me being asked to consult on the January 6th committee with specific respect to tracing Bitcoin transactions. And all that stuff was included in my sentencing memo to the judge, and was thrown out because the prosecution was intent on getting Dr. Bitcoin and not recognizing any of the contributions I had made towards law enforcement. They were not deemed significant or unique.
Do you want to talk about your pardon that you might get in 3 or 4 years?
No, I can't talk about that. I'm supposed to keep that one very hush-hush, but that was a fun conversation too.
Yeah.
Talked to a lot of politicians.
Yeah.
I find it's been very interesting to speak to many Republicans from the highest levels of federal down to a lot of state, Governor of Texas, Ted Cruz, those types of folks that are very interested in supporting me in my case, and because they really actually grok what's going on with Bitcoin. I don't know if they've quite got the message that, their advocacy is leaving a lot of people like me vulnerable, and that needs to be fixed. Either we need to change this rule at the federal level, or we need to have like a turnkey, gimmickly, turnkey, easy to grab state level license.
Well, I came across something on Tuesday because I did an event for real estate, and one of the presentations was tokenization of real estate. And one of the things that was brought up was securities laws from like 1931.
Sure.
And a lot of these securities laws, and probably kind of the stuff that got you, is just ancient laws that have no relevancy. I mean, I'm sure some of it, but when you're talking about crypto,
not really. Like, so every individual from TradFi that's become, orange pilled or has understood what blockchain's about, like Leo Malamud, he's the chairman emeritus of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. One of the first people to say, give a quote somewhat like this, is that Bitcoin represents one of the first truly new asset classes in human history. It's not a security, it's not a commodity, it's not a currency, it's something different. And you can't take a 1930s era securities regulation framework and try to in any way accurately apply it to this new asset class.
Right. Well, that's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, I want to stress that, like, people who are vulnerable to this law that I'm being prosecuted, sentenced, and going to prison over are not just people that are selling Bitcoin. It's anybody who engages in any type of peer-to-peer cryptocurrency transaction. If you're exchanging something from the real world for something in the crypto world and you're not using a licensed exchange, you too are legally culpable. And that doesn't mean you're going to be prosecuted for it. But as we all know, the blockchain is forever. There is a record of every transaction you've done on the blockchain. And, they just hired 86,000 new IRS agents. Who's to say they're not going to do the same thing for the white collar crime division and just retroactively prosecute everybody going back to 2018?
Well, when you say peer-to-peer, because I think one of the what people love to do, especially with Bitcoiners, is when they're talking to somebody who's never used Bitcoin, is like, look, I'll show you how easy it is. Here's a wallet, and they send them $1.
Right.
Is that
Could
that be seen as illegal?
Sending you $1? No. I sell you this for $1? Yes. Because it's an unlicensed exchange at that point. Giving you $1, that's a gift. Giving you $1 worth of Bitcoin is a gift.
Right.
If we're exchanging, now nobody at all has ever been prosecuted for a $1 transaction ever under this law. That's not to say you can't be. I mean, legally, you're still guilty of it.
Well, what's interesting about that is it reminds me, last fall I was at the Governor Abbott. He did a reception for all the Bitcoin miners, and I was there. And one of the throwaway jokes he was saying was, I guess early on in his campaigns, somebody wanted to donate Bitcoin, but his lawyer at the time said no because of the there's a lot of red tape when it comes to
how election
donations, whatnot.
Yeah.
And he was saying that there's no telling how much that Bitcoin could have been worth now, and that's why that lawyer is in the back of the room and not up here with me right now. And it was a joke because it was like, yeah, if they would have been able to donate Bitcoin, they could have a lot of money. But then what I'm hearing though is, maybe the lawyer was right not to do that because technically maybe that was illegal. Again, I don't know law and.
Yeah, and clearly I don't either. Otherwise, I wouldn't go to prison. But I've learned a couple things over the years.
Yeah.
But I know what my lawyers have told me about my compliance, and it feels like it doesn't feel like I've done anything wrong. And right. I know I was supposed to, and I did express remorse because this has obviously put a strain on my family. I feel remorseful for the consequences. I don't necessarily feel remorseful for not checking a box on a government website because I don't feel like that's a moral failing.
Right.
But I do feel remorseful because of my risk tolerance. This risk tolerance, this high risk tolerance that I have that has guided me so well in the world of journalism, traditional and tech, in the world of startup and entrepreneurship. It's dangerous when you run up against a highly regulated industry. And that highly regulated industry, what is regulation? Like regulation in our minds, as we think as normal humans who aren't cynical, we think regulations are there to protect us.
Right, protection.
But that's not what they're there for. Regulations are there to pull up the ladder behind an entrenched industry. It's called regulatory capture, is the cynical term for what regulations actually do. It captures an industry and makes it so cost prohibitive to get into that industry if you're not already an entrenched player, that the entrenched players have reduced competition. And banking is one of the oldest industries. Like it's been, like you said, the 30s is when regulations really started getting written about banking industry and the market trading industry. And
even that was a direct response to the Great Depression.
Right. Well, there was a lot of populist reasoning.
Black Friday or Black Tuesday.
Yeah. There's a lot of populism behind why those regulations get called for, as they always do. But when it comes time to write regulations, it's the industry experts who write the regulations.
Right.
What is an industry expert? It's somebody who worked in the industry, who is on the payroll of the industry that's getting regulated.
Right. Well, all you have to do is watch that with The Big Short.
The Big Short, but it's you could even go the boring route and look at Wikipedia. Go to Wikipedia, go to the FTC, go to the FCC, go to FinCEN. Look who all the board members are in those 3-letter organizations, and then look at their CVs.
Right.
Where did they come out of? These are bureaucrats that retired from the industry and spent years in the banking sector or the communications sector or the consumer like industry sector. They're basically regulators regulating their former bosses.
So to go back to you though, I know we had lunch yesterday, and I know what the joking lesson here is.
Yeah, don't talk
to police.
Don't talk to police.
But what are some other key takeaways from this whole experience? And I know, in a lot of ways, we're on that point where it's like, okay, all this is over. I finally got through all this, even though you're about to start. You haven't even started the hard part of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like
I think this would probably be the hardest part, is just dealing with, okay, the transition, and then yes,
if you can avoid being raided by the FBI, if you can avoid being prosecuted by the DOJ, I would strongly recommend.
Right.
It's not been a fun 2 years. Like, I had PTSD from every time there was a knock on my door that was a little bit too loud. I'm like, oh crap, they're back. Like,
oh yeah,
like I was jumping when the pizza man would come knock on the door. It's not good.
Yeah, I was held at gunpoint maybe 10 years ago, and for like 2 or 3 months after that, anytime I would go to my front door, and the glass door, and if somebody walked by, it was nerve-wracking.
Yeah. So
I completely can.
It sounds like a whiny thing to say.
I understand,
but it's been. I'm not an anxious person, but the last 2 years I've really struggled with legit levels of anxiety.
Right.
Because I don't know, at different points along the way, I don't know if I'm going away for 30 years, if I'm losing my family. Even if I go away for only 5 years, which was my max sentence for this particular crime, that means I don't get to see my kid till he's well into adulthood.
Right.
I'm losing significant chunks of my life for not filling out a form on a website. So the lesson learned here, aside from the joking one of don't get prosecuted, is that whole spiel I said about regulatory capture is, a lot of us in the crypto space are entrepreneurs or former entrepreneurs or current entrepreneurs. And you have to realize that you are not going up. If you're trying to disrupt Walmart, if you're trying to disrupt, taxi industry or something like that, you're going to run up against somewhat powerful interests. Believe me when I tell you, the banking industry is far more powerful than any other interest group that exists in any other industry.
Right.
They are woven into the fabric of our government. And there are really, really trivial things that you can do carelessly through the course of normal business that will result in you going to jail for 5 to 30 years.
Well,
and you've got to be extra careful.
Well, that's one thing that when it comes to the Bitcoin world and the crypto world that I always get a kick out of is like, well, the US dollar is going to crap, and when it fails, that's why we have to have Bitcoin. And in my mind, I always think, if the US dollar goes to zero, we're basically living in a zombie apocalypse. And it doesn't matter if you have all the Bitcoin in the world. You've got bigger problems, like how many bullets do you have? At least in my opinion.
Yeah,
and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's like, well, if you have all the Bitcoin, move to Puerto Rico.
It's very difficult to imagine what that world would be like,
right?
Because it's unprecedented. It's not unprecedented for fiat to go to zero. In fact, that is a guarantee for every fiat. It's going to go to zero given a long enough timeline. But it's never happened in a globally connected world,
right,
to the dominant superpower.
Did you watch that Tim Dillon video I sent you?
Yes, I did.
What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. We had a good run.
Yeah, we had a good run.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What are like the Bitcoin industry, the blockchain industry, Texas? Like what do you think are some warnings? Hey, what do you hope? What are you hopeful for? What do you fear?
It's a simple fix. It's not necessarily doesn't mean it's an easy fix, because there's very entrenched powers who would not want this fix, namely the banking industry. But the simple fix is either get rid of the federal registration requirement for anybody buying and selling Bitcoin peer-to-peer, or make it a free and cheap and widely publicized licensing, free and or cheap, widely publicized licensing at the state level. Like, as Abbott is going out there talking about how great Bitcoin is, as Cruz is going around talking about how great the mining industry is, they need to say, oh, and also go to, texasbitcoin.gov and click this button so you don't go to prison for trading Bitcoin.
Well, I think that, and that's the thing is, one, ignorance of the law is not...
Doesn't excuse me.
Right. And again, like we talked about yesterday, is how it doesn't matter if you're ignorant or if you broke the law, or even if there's no law shown, you're at the consequence of whoever's dealing with you at that time, like
Right.
the judge or the prosecutor.
Yeah, the prosecutor just like, and ironically, he actually resigned from the prosecutor's office 2 weeks before my trial, before my last hearing. And on the backs of a prosecution of 2 Texas ICO guys, my case, and the Jared Rice case, he got himself a nice cushy lobbying job at a big law firm.
I don't know. To me, that sounds sketch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is, but that's how the DOJ is motivated, right?
Right.
You get some high profile cases, you put out some interesting, eye-catching press releases, and then you put those on your LinkedIn profile. And then if you've been in the prosecutor's office for long enough, you go and apply for some big law firms, and you get a nice job for 6+ figures, and you're made in the shade.
Well, in going back to the Bitcoin and the, if I can scan your phone with my phone, I can send you Bitcoin, one would assume that I can do it. If you want to sell me that water, I'll just scan you $1, whatever.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from you, and I know you're not a lawyer and I'm not a lawyer, so this is all entertainment purposes.
Sure.
But that could potentially be seen as legal.
Yeah. Well, if you ask my federal agent, he would tell you that's illegal. In fact, he did.
But yet, it happens
1,000 times a day, 1,000,000 times a day. Yeah.
just in Texas.
Yeah.
So how do we educate? Is it kind of like a felony a day? I don't know if you remember that concept.
Yeah, it's absolutely, 3 felonies a day. Is
that what it is?
Yeah. Like, it's one of those things that you probably don't have to worry about right now, but we definitely, as a industry, we need to be lobbying to fix, because the chances are you and I'm not going to get prosecuted for this ever again, unless I really piss somebody off. Right. And you're never going to get prosecuted for this.
Never say never.
And, I would say 99% of the people watching this are never going to get prosecuted for this.
Right.
But if the eye of Sauron comes on you, and
they're going to find something,
and they like you for something, and they can't get you for that thing, this is one of these things that, everybody commits this felony, we can get them for it.
Well, I think that's the thing, though. It's like, Capone killed thousands of people. I mean, allegedly. I don't know. But according to the movies,
sure,
thousands of people, whatever. And they got him for tax evasion. And so, growing up, you're like, we got him.
Yeah.
Good on you.
Tell you what,
good job, Kevin Costner, for getting him.
Right. I was gonna say.
All those things. But then as you become more of an adult, maybe a little bit more libertarian, you're like, wait a minute.
Isn't that great?
You couldn't pin him on the stuff that he did. So go find some random loophole law that you made up or whatever. And I'm not saying tax evasion is made up law.
Made up, right? But it's not murder,
right?
It's I tell you, the other thing that has been completely destroyed to me, and maybe I can sue the federal government for emotional damages on this one, is I cannot watch any crime procedural with any sort of sense of realism, because as I said, these FBI agents, these were not. We were watching Hannibal at the time. Have you seen Hannibal?
The TV or the movie?
The TV show.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's this amazing game of 4D chess. These FBI and FBI consultants are playing with this incredibly intelligent serial killer, and all these moving parts are going on around. So I think you may recall, I have a 3D printing farm, and I was making like masks and stuff like that. One of the masks that I made was a little alien face hugger, mask, but it was like it also had like a filter in it or whatever, so you could wear it as personal protection. And there was boxes of these things underneath the 3D printers, and they're going through everything. They're opening up boxes. These knuckleheads were walking around scaring each other by opening up the box, like, ooh, check this out. Whoa, it's an alien. They're just goofing around. They're not, there's no 4-dimensional chess being played in the actual FBI. Like, it's just a bunch of people hanging. They're talking about going to Applebee's as soon as they leave my house. Well, they're just like people punching a clock. In fact, one of the agents, sorry, I'll this is the last one I'll say.
No, you go for
to
it.
Denigrate the FBI's. So as my wife and the agents were waiting for me to get home from Frisco during the raid, my wife it kind of get a lull in the conversations because my wife has nothing to say about any of this stuff. They're grilling her. She doesn't know anything. She's a volleyball coach.
Right.
They determine, this is the lead agent she's talking to. They determine that my wife had to go through more licensing and training to become a volleyball coach than the agent had to go through to become an agent.
I don't know about that one.
That was what he said. He said, "Yeah, I just saw it online and I applied for it.
That can't be true.
I've got a 2-year degree. I don't have a degree in anything special, just an MBA."
Maybe he wasn't a full-on. Maybe he was.
No,
just
he was
there.
the lead agent.
Oh, he was the lead agent.
He was the lead agent's there was 2 lead agents that were grilling me, and it was that guy.
I don't know, but the TV and the movies, they make the FBI seem like this elite service.
They do indeed make them seem like that, yes.
Yeah, that's the only experience I have with the FBI is a buddy of mine. I told you about this. He went public with a thing in the early 2000s, and you can Google it online. It's called Cisco Gate. And basically, Cisco had hired his company to reverse engineer routers because at the time, routers are hardware. You can't hack hardware. Well, he discovered you can. And this is like 2002, 2003, that era, which I think back then, hardware is hardware, software is software. Well, he presented it to Cisco, and they're like, "Oh, thank you so much." They're super thankful. And they scheduled him. I'm not familiar with the tech conference world, but I guess in the tech world, when you find a bug, you fix it, and then you go public at a conference with the company to show that, hey, you still have confidence of us. We fixed it.
Yeah,
Here's what
a big
it was.
enough deal. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So they were scheduled to do this at some big black hat, white hat conference,
DEF CON or something
in Vegas.
Yeah, DEF CON then.
And in literally a week before the conference, it was announced that he wasn't supposed to do that. The conference had to hire 100. Yeah. So this is my buddy one. So they had to hire like 100 day laborers to rip out his presentation from the books. They broke all the CD-ROM presentations that were going for him. And then, And he goes on stage and he's like, he quits his job. He goes on stage. He wants to learn about Cisco. And he that day he was a market maker because Cisco took a hit.
I imagine. Yeah.
But the reason they took a hit is because the way they came after him. The FBI came after him. Their case lawyer was a guy named Chad. We joked about this because every time I was on the phone with Mike, he'd be like, "Say hi to Chad." I'm like, "Who's Chad?" He's like, "That's the FBI agent that's listening to the phone call." But what he was saying in that whole, because it's 20 years later.
My guy's Dan, by the way.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to call me, we can talk to Dan together.
Hey, Dan. But from his perspective, the CIA loved him, the Air Force loved him, the Secret Service loved him, all because their mentality was, if you can do this, China can do this
For sure.
and we need to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I had accolades in my, like I had letters written by the former chief of police of the NYPD. A character reference letter was written for me by the intelligence department head for the Capitol Police, the co-founder of the NCRI, Alona, the co-founder of Ukraine DAO, who's like literally saving lives in the Ukraine war. I had 27 character reference letters, a good portion of them from existing law enforcement.
Well, the point I was trying to make with this is Mike had the Secret Service, the FBI, or not
Yeah.
the FBI, the Secret Service, CIA, Air Force, all loving what he did. But the FBI is a good old boy network.
Oh yeah.
Where they protect each other. So, you had all these former FBI agents and it's just like asking a favor. So they came after him hard.
It's
a
very culturally isolated.
That's the point. So
law enforcement division. Yeah.
So that's why I'm bringing it up, is to go back to you. It's like with them, it's like, well, I mean,
Yeah, I didn't have any FBI endorsements.
they don't see
Yeah.
they don't see the shades of the rainbow. They see white and black.
Yeah, and I will say this culturally, and this comes from not just my personal experience, but I had like 7 or 8 lawyers that I hired throughout the course of this case that had different perspectives, and one of them told me, like, look, FBI agents, the archetype is Boy Scout. Like, they see the world in black and white, and there's a whole lot more black than there is white, and they're out there to rub it all out. And at the moment that you've crossed the line that they think that you've crossed, then you're just not you're not on the right side of the law.
Right.
And that's it. Now the general attitude of the U.S. Attorney's Office, which was the level of the DOJ that was prosecuting me, is this headline grabbing type, just fame grabbing type personality.
Right.
And those two in a room together feed off each other in a very weird way.
To me, it's like the scene. This is gonna be a leap in World War Z. Did you see that with
Yeah.
Brad Pitt, where they're on the plane and he's prepping that guy, saying, "Hey, these SEALs, these special forces guys, they're all hammers. So if you see something that needs to be, treated carefully, let them know, because they just smash everything."
Right.
And using that analogy, I think the FBI and a lot of these agencies are just hammers, where they see everything as, if you're on their radar, it's for a reason.
Right.
And I do want to throw out there that, like, me personally, I'm still, maybe it's just because I'm white male Texan and former service Marines, and maybe it's just because I see the good in everything, that I'm still like, hey, maybe even though your history with the FBI, my buddy Mike's history with the FBI, like, I'm still like, hey, we're good. The government is good. The police is good. The FBI everything's good.
That's certainly a good thing to have on the record and
Right.
live video, for sure. If I was in your
Not what I was
if I was in your
doing.
seat, I would probably say the same thing.
That's not what I was. But
They know it's not true coming from me.
yeah. Well, that's one thing I was going to ask you, is like, how disenfranchised are you now?
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like completely radicalized by this experience, because I also had pretty fringe beliefs, and crypto had already done a lot for me in that respect before I got here. But I will say that I don't feel like there is much redeemable about the current form of the state that we have.
Right.
I feel like I've always felt that we could do it better with a radically different system, but I didn't feel like the current system that we have is as malevolent as the experience that I've been through.
And by system, are you talking about like the policing system?
Just criminal justice and justice in general. Like, and so this
Because
is,
if you're about to say the government, Sohill was about to jump up for joy. 'Cause he loved down with the man, down with the government.
well, I mean, I don't. So, if you've seen my email signature file, I mean, it says crypto anarchist, and I have a very specific definition of what that is. I don't believe that we should violently overthrow the government, but I do believe that permissionless, stateless governance is the path forward to individual liberty and world peace. Because you can't have peace where enforcement is required. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You can't have true peace where you have to point guns at people and tell them behave.
Right.
Anarchy is not, when you say that word, anarchy, people think anarchy equals chaos. Anarchy actually equals order. And anarchy is very boring in practice. It's a lot of like rules and, figuring things out and how do people interact with each other. Anarchy is order, but it is order without enforcement.
Well, I mean, we can go way off topic, and that's kind of how I feel about religion a lot. Because, like, with religion, was it Marx? Religion is the opiate of the masses.
Sure, yeah.
And was that Marx?
It's either Marx or Nietzsche.
I think it was Marx. Because, like, to me, I don't kill someone because I'm afraid I'm not going to go to heaven. I don't kill someone because that's not the right thing to do. You don't do that. You don't do bad things because they're bad, not because you're afraid of the consequences.
Everyone has,
at least in my opinion.
Everyone has a voice inside them. Not everybody listens to it.
Right.
I find, because I'm a nerd who overthinks everything, that, while I may not need religion to tell me what's right and what's wrong, it's very helpful to have an axiom or a creed. And that's why I gravitate towards anarchy, because anarchy, it basically principally revolves around the non-aggression principle. If you're doing a thing, you can be personally motivated to do things that are harmful.
Right.
Like you and I could get into a disagreement and I would want to punch you or you would want to punch me. But as an anarchist who's motivated by the non-aggression principle, look, my right to satisfy myself ends where it harms somebody else.
Right.
I mean, that was the principle that Ross Ulbricht used when he founded the Silk Road, right? It's a whole marketplace governed by the non-aggression principle. You can buy and sell drugs for personal usage or whatever. You're not going to sell guns. You're not going to sell stolen goods because these require harm coming to other people. You're not going to sell child sexual assault materials because that's obviously harming somebody.
Right.
It's not just a free-for-all. But it's an anarchist marketplace.
And that's the Free Ross style that you're talking about?
Well, that's the Silk Road I'm talking about. But,
right,
but Free Ross Dow is kind of where I've learned a lot about that.
He's the one that created the Silk Road.
So,
right?
yeah, Ross.
Well, to circle back to crypto, that was one of the things that, with Bitcoin, at least in the early days for me, was, hey, it's for malicious things. Mm-hmm. And yet when you hear about the ledger, you're saying that, not you're saying, but the ledger system is immutable and it's there forever. So that's like the worst place to do criminal things because it's there for everybody to see.
Right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a permanent record of everything you do.
Yeah, like Sohail brought up some good questions. Like, Mildred, your Pennsylvanian Middle America white woman.
Yes.
Like, where did she say the money was coming from?
So she expressed she had told me that it was a electronics business belonging to her husband, and that she bought a lot of parts and stuff from China. She even I know she did buy stuff from China because one time she asked me for help making a crypto payment for an Alibaba listing or something. And I was actually walking her through the process of sending crypto to this Chinese person for a batch of like some kind of electronics parts or whatever. So like the story sort of checked out. Like I don't try to get into people's business because I don't really want to provide tech support for their entire business, but like the hints that you pick up. She said I was buying electronics, didn't want to keep doing international wire transfers. I'm like, yeah, I've had bank accounts shut down because I was buying stuff off at Alibaba.
Right.
That makes sense.
Well, I mean, hell, I have virtual assistants in the Philippines, and finding ways to pay them in the early days was a pain in the ass. Finally, my payroll system, I used Gusto. They implemented an international contractor payment gateway, which made, I was like, finally,
yeah,
it's so much easier.
I mean, so back at the SiliconANGLE days, a lot of our we just happened to run into a crop of writers that were British expats living in Thailand. And we used, what's it called, Upwork, for our payment, our personnel management stuff for all the writers. Upwork pays out through PayPal. PayPal obviously does a wire transfer or some sort of bank transfer. So, but Upwork took its 7%. PayPal took its, like 5%. Then the wire transfer, the bank transfer took another chunk of their checkout. They were ending up with about 65% of their actual check, in their hands after all the different payment processors took a piece of it. So we switched to Bitcoin. We switched to crypto for a lot of those guys.
Yeah. It's funny because like I use Fiverr, I use Upwork. Upwork, I don't use it that much because when I use it, that they're getting raked over the coals when it comes to the amount of money. So, but if you try to take them off of that platform, you get deplatformed and you can't use their service anymore.
Right. So I mean, when someone says, "Yeah, I'm using this for my business and it's for payroll or if it's for inventory acquisition," why would I question that? It makes perfect sense.
So, one thing that another question was, do you know who else is the FBI targeting for these pump and dumps? Is there any celebrities out there, or is that you have no clue?
I mean, the last guy I saw of any significant profile that was being prosecuted for pump and dump was John McAfee, and also a friend, and he died in prison, in Spanish prison, so before he could face trial.
Right.
I don't see a lot of these types of charges being filed, which is interesting and unfortunate that they are going after a lot of like legitimate crypto users while letting harmful actors, misanthropic actors thrive in the ecosystem.
So your Tuesday, do you know what that day looks like?
So I'm driving over the weekend down to Beaumont. Tuesday at 2:00, I report in and surrender my belongings. Probably give it back to my wife.
Is your wife going with you?
Wife's drop me off.
I was going to say, I was like, can you just park your car out in the front?
Yeah, just leave it there in the parking lot for a year. No. So I can't tell the future and exactly how the BOP is going to treat me, but federal time isn't like state time. You must serve 85% of your time. So my term will be at minimum a little over 12 months. There is a program that allows for early release 6 months before the end of your sentence where you can transition out to a halfway house. If anybody's following the Martin Shkreli case, the Martin Shkreli farmer bro, look him up.
I'm detached from everything.
Interesting case. He recently just transitioned out into halfway house after serving some of his sentence. But that's so roughly 6.5, 7 months into my case, I might qualify for that program and transition back to the real world.
And then what's that look like? What's the real world look like? Or do you have plans for when you're in prison?
I mean, I'm going to be doing a lot of writing.
It's such a weird conversation.
It is.
Obviously, I really appreciate you doing this, and I know it's kind of last minute. Like, hey, you want to try to get your message out there?
Last minute or no minute, right?
Right, but it's just like, how do you say, what are you going to do while you're in prison? Like, honestly, read a lot of books, work out, get your grind on.
Yeah,
your hustle.
So I've been very fortunate that the people that I've been working with, the guys at the Crypto Mine and the Free Ross DAO, have been very well aware of my situation the entire time, and I'm confident that as long as those organizations exist, I will have work waiting for me when I get out. I won't be forced to flip burgers in a halfway house.
Right.
I sold my house in anticipation of the sentence, so I was able to pay my family's rent and utilities going forward a year or two. So I was expecting, because they were pursuing 37 months. The government was pursuing 37 months, and I only got 15. So actually I have a little bit more money put away than I thought I was going to have left over. So I'm not in a bad position. I don't need to fundraise. I just need to mark my time productively, read, write. I'm probably going to write a bunch of white papers or something while I'm in.
Is there a fear, or was there a fear that the government would or will come after your funds or your Bitcoin or whatever?
No. I mean, like maybe a fear initially, because they did seize all my devices, and for a good, you know, hour or two after the raid, they had devices with my private keys on it and could have at that point seized it. But the wheels of whatever the FBI, their processes work so slowly. It was about 2 or 3 weeks before they turned on any of my devices. So, by at that point, I had moved any digital assets I had over to new accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was not a particular concern at that point.
Right. So, what, like the white paper, like when you say you're going to be productive, like what does that mean to you?
Well, I'm not going to be conducting business,
right?
Because that's illegal.
That's illegal.
Yeah, but I will. I mean, it's kind of like the that Twilight Zone episode where the guy is like the last guy in the world living in a library, and he's fine. There's finally time now. I can read as long as my glasses don't get broken. I'm good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll probably do a lot of reading and do a lot of writing. I really enjoyed I wrote probably like 27 white papers that were published from 2016 to 2019. I haven't had a lot of time to do stuff like that since.
Mm-hmm.
I still got a newsletter that I'll be publishing weekly that I'll should have access to. They give you like access to an email terminal, so I should have access to update that email list. Yeah, Just going to try to keep myself distracted with intellectual pursuits to the extent that it's possible.
So as far as messaging to a random person, specific people, what is there anything that you'd like to get out there? Because that's one of the reasons we did this, is so you could tell your story, clear up anything that could be seen as, maybe not the true. Like I think we covered a lot of that, but I would feel remiss if we ended without, hey, circling back and be
Sure.
like, hey, did we hit all the things that you wanted to hit?
Yeah, I mean, like principally, just to recap, I think something needs to change specifically with 18 USC 1960. That was a law that was written in the late 90s, updated in the early 2000s, hasn't been updated since. It just keeps getting reinterpreted.
Right.
Something needs to change there, particularly with the crypto industry, before it becomes a real problem for a far greater number of people than just a few crypto dealers here and there. Number one. Number two, obviously, we need criminal justice reform in America. This has been no surprise to anybody that has been awake between now and 2020. Like at every level, state, local, federal, we need criminal justice reform. The prison system has legalized slavery. I'm going to be forced into a labor program when I'm in prison that has a maximum payout of $2 an hour.
What do you know what you're going to be doing?
I don't know. Probably knitting socks, making license plates, something. Who knows?
Isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah. So like what I'm saying, like we have a system that's broken top to bottom. If you want to be a part of fixing that, Free Rosdow is a great place to start. Join.freerosdow.com. And if you want to join Free Rosdow, even as just a lurker in the chat rooms, come hang out at Thursdays at 7 o'clock. There is a letter writing party every week where you can write letters to Ross Ulbricht, and they're going to be adding my name to there. So if you want to communicate with me while I'm in prison, I will have plenty of time to write you back. And they'll kind of guide you through the process. It's a little bit labyrinthine getting a message into the prison system. So they'll guide you through the process in that 7 o'clock letter writing party on like how do you write to somebody who's imprisoned and how do you, get the message through without it being rejected and that sort of thing. And finally, like I think despite all this, like I had kind of an opportunity to renounce my religion at some point along the way. Like there was a couple of people that were advocating for me early on in this process, before the press release even came out with the Department of Justice. They were saying like, Mark, let's help you get you back on your feet. This is a tragic thing that's happening to you. But the condition is you can't be in the crypto industry. Like you can't be in Bitcoin anymore. We're gonna pivot you back to startups or something. And like I just couldn't do it. Like I couldn't do it. I truly believe that blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are a transformative technology that will only benefit humanity and society if adopted and fully implemented. And I can't even if it means I spend some time apart from my family, Like, I'm not going to kind of just say, oh, well, screw society. I truly do believe, that we're on to something here. And so I wouldn't say to those that are listening to the crap that I'm going through and say, well, maybe I won't be in Bitcoin. Maybe I won't be in crypto. No, don't take that message. Like, this is still important work.
Right.
Just don't make my mistake.
And which was?
Not filling out talking to the lawyer, talking to the law, but also not filling out that form. Yeah.
Right. Well, Mark, Dr. Bitcoin, that's so weird to call you that.
Yeah. I know. It wasn't even supposed to be a title originally.
Yeah.
It was just a name of my column.
Yeah. Well, it was like the Anon Twitter thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because like a mutual friend of ours, like he has his public Twitter and he has his Anon Twitter, and his public Twitter has like, I don't know, 80 followers or something, and his non whatever, but he doesn't want to be known,
Yeah.
And it's so weird to me, like, because I've been in such a like always public facing, like doing events, doing YouTube videos, doing whatever, so I'm always out and about. Like the idea of doing anything anonymous for me is, it's like, well, why? Because you're wasting time. But I guess it for the crypto world.
Yeah, think about it. The crypto. So like, it's a technology geared towards pseudonymity. Like,
Right.
You can have an identity that isn't tied to the real one. And for you and I, we came up through media. Like, this is like journalism, reporting,
Right.
public facing stuff, marketing. Like, it thrives on authenticity. And so, again, like, I never thought I was doing anything wrong. So why would I not own up to being Dr. Bitcoin?
Right.
But if you're just getting started out in crypto, maybe be an on.
Maybe that's the quote.
Yeah.
Maybe be an on.
Maybe be an on.
If you're going to be selling anything with crypto,
Yeah.
again, this is for entertainment.
Not
purposes
legal
only.
advice.
Not legal advice. Not financial advice.
Sorry, Craig,
Device,
my lawyer.
advice.
Craig, you can tell.
God.
Write a paragraph that goes over my face now. It disclaims me.
Yeah. There's disclaimers.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you again. Would love to do this in
Let's do this.
8 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Let
you know how it went.
depending-
Maybe I'll have an army of Bitcoiners come out of there with me.
Maybe. No, like you said, the judicial me is not to go too straying into that world, but I mean we already did a lot. But
Yeah.
it's who's that? Brittany Griner.
Griner, yeah.
They're hey, free Britney, but yet Joe Rogan pointed out there's thousands and thousands of incarcerated individuals in America for the same crime.
This is exactly my point, and this is why I try not to be too whiny about my circumstance.
Yeah.
And this is what I've learned through working with the criminal justice reform group at Free Ross, is that Ross and I share a lot of traits. We're white dudes who came from some level of privilege, who are going to prison or are in prison for silly white collar things.
Right.
With an outsized sentence. By the way, this is the most egregious sentence that anybody in 10 years has been given for this particular crime. Like the longest sentence prior to this was 12 months, and that guy was involved with child pornography. So,
Wow.
we both have outsized sentences, although his is 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Mine is a measly 15 months. We were just talking about somebody the other day who came out of prison after 28 years for having basically personal usage amounts of marijuana. As he comes out of the prison, there's a billboard that says, hey, come over here to exit 30 to go to the dispensary and get yourself some weed. Like, our system needs to be rebuilt. I am by far not the most victimized victim of our system.
Right. Well, I think that's a good place to end.
Okay.
Unless you have anything else.
No, I mean, we could both talk for hours and
I know,
hours.
I know. Well, and the thing is, though, it's like, I want to be mindful of your time.
Sure.
Just in general, but then also mindful that, you have 4 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just sucks.
It's not great.
No.
It's not great. But I'll get through it. It's not going to be the end of the world.
Yeah. I mean, That's one thing that, like, you get older, how quick time flies. And you know, your parents tell you that when you're young, and you're like, no, 1 week, that's forever. And then you get older, and you're like, yeah, I'll call you in a couple days or whatever. And it's been months. Like Mike earlier, like bringing him up from Cisco, he's like my best friend since kindergarten. And I haven't talked to him in, I don't know, 8 months.
Yeah.
You know, and
It's
not
just-
because he lives in DC.
Right.
You know,
Time flies by.
and you just, I meant to call him, and you just don't call.
Right.
Or hell, my parents, I try to go visit them like every other week or something. I think it's been like a month and a half since I visited them. Mm-hmm. So I'm a bad son.
I know.
So all that to be said, I think a year sounds daunting, sounds scary, but ultimately will fly.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Again, a lot of time to read, a lot of time to write, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like, and it's not, I'm not in a situation like Ross is. Ross is in a supermax because he was legitimately being treated as a political prisoner. I'm just a guy who is caught in somebody's unfortunate quest for a better career.
Right.
And I could very easily paint myself as a political prisoner, as a target. I don't think that's the case. I think it's a much more banal, boring reason. But I'm going to minimum security. There's not even a fence that goes all the way around this place.
Right.
You know, the apocalypse comes, the zombies are, the fence is not going to protect me from the zombies. So, so like that's the type of facility that I'm going to be in. It's not Club Fed or anything, but it's not Oz.
Right.
You know?
Well, best of luck to you, sir.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on the other side.
I'll see you on the other side.
I hope you enjoyed that video. I know I did. Mark is, in my view, is a good dude. I enjoy him. I enjoyed talking to him. He's given me advice over the past year or so for my business. At the end of the day, it's up to you to decide whether he actually did any wrongdoing. I implore you to do your own due diligence, your own research into the matter. There are some links in the description below about how you could support Mark or reach out to him. And I look forward to further discussions with Mark. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, comment below, and we'll see you next time.